Hi there. Okay, this is the third part, and I hope the final part of our hepatic diseases and how they affect kinetics slides. All right, so the child pugh score, I think I mentioned in the end of that last one, realizing I was going over time, that we don't have a really great way of, why is this doing this? Sorry. We don't have a really great way of measuring liver function and how it would affect drugs like we do with creatinine clearance. Creatinine clearance is a great indicator of how well the kidneys are working and how much we can count on them for for changing renal clearance. We don't have a good measure like that for hepatic functionality, but the child pugh score at least gives us some idea of how healthy the liver is and how useful it is for drug metabolism. So it is the most common way to evaluate the metabolic ability of the liver. They look at 5 different things. Albumin, for obvious reasons. Total bilirubin, also should be pretty obvious. Prothrombin time, because of manufacture of clotting factors. Ascites, and hepatic encephalopathy. So it looks at those 5 different things, and you get a score of 1 through 3 for each of those issues or tests or problems. And then you add up the score, and then it gives you an idea of the relative health of the liver and its metabolic ability, really. So total bilirubin, you just look and see what the patient's total bilirubin is. If it's less than 2, you get 1 point. If it's between 2 and 3, you get 2 points. And if it's greater than 3, you get 3 points, and on and on and on. Note that PT time is the seconds prolonged. It's not the INR, but the actual prothrombin time. If it's 5 or less, it's going to be, well, it can't be less than 5. That's going to be normal, because obviously if you look through here, you get 1 point if these are all normal values. So it's going to be 5 for a normal patient. It's going to have to be at least 5. If it's between 8 and 9, this would give you a moderate decrease in the metabolic activity of the liver. So if you assume a clearance of decrease about 25%, for a drug that's primarily cleared by the liver, you can make some adjustments. So you'd figure their clearance decreases by 25%, which would probably increase your CSS average by about 25%, and therefore you need to decrease your dose rate by about 25%, okay? If you're greater than or equal to 10, that's considered severe disease and therefore a severe impairment of the metabolic activity. So you would assume the clearance to be about half of what it normally is. If the drug, this is obviously just a rough guess. This shows you the area under the curve for a drug called Emprenavir, which is an HIV drug, and it's the area under the curve of the Emprenavir as the patient's child pugh score worsens. So here's a normal child pugh score, an increased mildly child pugh score, moderate, and then what we consider severe disease. And you can see the area of the curve increasing as the patient's metabolic health decreases. So that would make sense that the area of the curve would increase. Here's a case we can talk through. HP is a 62-year-old white male with hepatic cirrhosis and severe COPD. He's currently not a smoker and has no CHF. Please determine a starting dosing regimen for HP to start theophylline with a goal CSS average of 10 milligrams per liter. His total bilirubin is 2.6. His albumin is 2.5. His PT prothrombin time is prolonged by 8 seconds. He has slight ascites, no encephalopathy, and a normal clearance is 0.7 mils per minute per kilogram, and volume is 0.5 liters per kilogram. We would have to also consider that that he has COPD, but we'll start here. So, bilirubin, where does he fall? He's in the 2 to 3 range, right? So we get 2 points for that. Albumin, he is less than 2.8, so he gets 3 points for that. His PT was prolonged by 8 seconds, I think, so he gets 3 points for that. He has some slight ascites, so he'll get 2 points for that. So let's see, we've got 10 points so far, right? And he has no encephalopathy that we know of. So he's got 11 points, right? Is that right? 2, 5, 10, 11 points. So he is in the severe decrease in metabolic activity. So we would assume a decrease in clearance by 50%. So instead of it being, what did we say here? We'll have to go all the way back. 0.7 mils per minute per kilogram. It would be 0.35 milliliters per minute per kilogram. Oops, I could have just clicked, couldn't I have? Oopsie. I guess I should have checked that. All right, please determine a starting dosing regimen for him to start theophylline. So again, we'll assume the clearance is now 0.35 mils per minute per kilogram instead of 0.7. Assume he's about a 70 kilogram patient. So that works out to be 24.5 mils per minute or 1.47 liters per hour. And then again, if let's look and we just plug and chug into our jelly equation here. His dose rate should be 14.7 milligrams per hour or 352 milligrams per day. Oops, and his half-life would be about 16.5 hours. So you could probably get away with 350 milligrams per day of theophylline in this patient. Okay, is everybody good with that? All right. I will tell you in general, I think I've mentioned this before, but the oxidative pathways are more affected by hepatic disease than are the conjugation pathways, but this goes over the some of the conjugated pathways here, and you can see, for example, these are the healthy patients. This is the activity as far as the enzyme activity. You can see the glucuronidase. There's really no difference between these are healthy liver and these are patients with different types of liver disease, mixed hepatitis and cirrhosis. So there's chronic, active, and active hepatitis and cirrhosis. So you can see there's really no change at all. Sulfotransferase, there is a decrease. But there's quite a lot of overlap too, isn't there? But there is certainly a trend down, but it's not very distinct. Acetyltransferase also is definitely lower. It does have some overlap with normal. Same thing with the glutathione. Probably the glutathione transferase is the most affected, then maybe followed by the acetyltransferase, then the sulfotransferase, and the glucuronidase. We really don't see much difference in at all. This is a paper looking at the CYP system, and you can see here that this was looking at the different CYP families in the P450 system. What they did was they took 20 patients with hepatic disease and they gave a cocktail to look at these 4 enzyme families. So they gave caffeine for 1A2, 2C19 was mefenitoin, 2D6 despriquin, and 2E1 was chlorzoxazone. So they gave these drugs to these patients to see what their metabolism was like. What they found was in mild disease with a child pugh score of 5 or 6, we already saw a decrease in metabolism of 63% for the 2C19. And if you got into moderate or severe, you saw a decrease of 80% of the normal activity of 2C19. 2C19 is most affected by liver disease most quickly and most dramatically. 1A2 is second. We see a decrease in 69%. 2D6, similar. 1A2 happens more quickly than 2D6. And 2E1, it has to be moderate to severe before we see any change, and then it's 60%. So this is roughly, these two are similar. 2C19 is the worst, 1A2 and 2D6 follow, and 2E1 is the least affected. And this shows the caffeine metabolic ratio. So if it's being turned over, you're going to see a higher amount of the metabolite. So you can see the controls are all fairly high on that metabolism, and then as you move through, as the child pugh score increases, you can see that metabolism starts to slow. Same thing with 2C19. 2C19 drops off very quickly. You see no change really in 5. But then when you hit 6, it's already pretty much down to less than 25 here, which is basically no metabolism. 2D6 we can see takes a longer time to fall off, and 2E1 we don't see it fall off quickly at all. This shows the some compromised and uncompromised liver failure. So the dark bars are uncompromised and the gray is compromised liver disease, and we can see the percent difference from a healthy liver. We can see again 2C9 is the most affected, followed by 1A2 and 2D6, and then 2E1 the least affected. I think this is a really helpful graph. What this tells you is how the clearance changes with hepatic function. So as hepatic function worsens, as we move along here to the right, hepatic function is worsening. So with 2C19 we see a drop off very quickly, even before the hepatic disease becomes very pronounced. So again, it falls very quickly, and then you lose it all early on. CYP1A2 is pretty linear. As you lose hepatic function, you lose 1A2. And then 2D6, remember 2C19, I should probably remind you, is a phenytoin and warfarin enzyme. 1A2 is theophylline and caffeine. 2D6 are a lot of the psych drugs and the cardiovascular drugs, the heart and head one. 2D6 and 2E1 is alcohol. So it's interesting that you can metabolize alcohol even when your liver's dying until it's pretty much done. So you maintain 2E1 right along. You really don't lose much function at all until you're in really bad shape. So we want to be most concerned about drugs in the that are metabolized by 2C19 and then followed by 1A2 and 2D6. But we're especially interested in these drugs that are 2C19 that are high extraction drugs given orally. Here's our little website if you want to look up the CYP substrates, inducers, and inhibitors, and that's kept pretty well up to date. So the 2C19, omeprazole, phenytoin, a lot of the anti-epileptics, as you can see here, and warfarin. Those are probably the big ones. Clopidogrel, maybe clomipramine, amitriptyline, you would be concerned about. But none of those are high extraction drugs, so that's the good news. 1A2, I think we mentioned, was caffeine, theophylline. Warfarin is also metabolized by this, verapamil partially, propranolol partially. So I think what I said, I think you're most concerned about the 2C19 drugs, the 1A2 drugs, 2D6 drugs, especially drugs that are high extraction given orally. You're going to see a big difference in those drugs because of the increase in bioavailability and decrease in clearance. All right, hope these help. See you soon. Bye.